Welcome to Crimson Drive. It's time to start your engines.
In the beginning was Daytona.
Here we go.
The birthplace of speed, the launch pad of legends, the great American race.
Oh, they're in the wall.
It's always been,
Keep digging, stay in the gas.
and will always be, the proving ground for greatness.
Let's go, boys.
Every driver looking to be remembered, every fan looking for something they'll never forget. Secure your seats now at Daytona500.com.
Roll Tide and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover. Great to be with you from our Tuscaloosa studios as we're back to football coming up this Saturday. Alabama against LSU here in Tuscaloosa. Full coverage of the game coming up in just a moment. We'll go through everything coming up on the show, plus our headlines, thanks to our friends at RJ Young. RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. They've given us a smart board to go through really in an interactive way with everything that's coming up on the show. First things first, a one-on-one conversation with the quarterback of the Crimson Tide, Jalen Milroe. He's been with us a lot this season, and he'll talk about his preparation for LSU. Then we'll hear from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, with coach's checklist from his Wednesday press conference. Nick Kelly was there at that press conference, even asked a question. He'll be talking with us on the big picture. He covers Alabama for the Tuscaloosa News. Eli Gold will be along to preview what's coming up later tonight with head coach and the Nick Saban show, plus some thoughts on the LSU Tigers. And then the play-by-play voice of LSU, Chris Blair, will be along for the other booth, kind of giving us the latest on LSU with several injuries that could impact this game coming up on Saturday. Speaking of the game, it's Alabama, it's LSU, and really the SEC West is on the line in this matchup. A later start than normal, 6:45, and our radio coverage will start at 3:30 coming up all across the Crimson Tide Sports Network, so we look forward to all the coverage to get you set for Alabama against LSU. Coach Saban, once the head coach at LSU, but since his time in Tuscaloosa, 12-6 against the Tigers, very good marks against LSU throughout his career. Dallas Turner has been named to the Lombardi Award semifinalist list, and Caleb Downs also a semifinalist for the Sean Alexander Award. Of course, Sean Alexander, a former Crimson Tide running back, that goes to the best freshman in the nation. The Sean Alexander Award, great recognition for Caleb Downs. Crimson Tide soccer team were really getting into the postseason. They started their run of the SEC tournament on Tuesday and unfortunately fell after several overtimes to Mississippi State 2-0 in a penalty kick shootout after the match was a 1-1 draw throughout the first 90 minutes of play. So for the Crimson Tide, they will wait for Monday's selection show from the NCAA tournament to see where they're going to go. Most likely will host at least the first round, possibly could host the second weekend here in Tuscaloosa, as Alabama is back in the NCAA tournament for a third straight year. Great resume for Wes Hart and the Crimson Tide, and who knows, maybe the fresh legs of only playing one match this week will help Alabama as it starts its run coming up next week in the NCAA tournament. Some other notes around Crimson Tide athletics. It was good to be back at Coleman Coliseum for Crimson Tide women's basketball. Last night, a dominant win, 82-32, the final score against UAH, and there will be a basketball doubleheader coming up next Monday. 4:30, the women's team will host Alabama State, and then the men's team will start its season around 7 o'clock against Morehead State. So really exciting. We'll have all the coverage for you here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network of the season opener for Alabama men's and women's basketball. Then the volleyball team, they'll be at Texas A&M coming up at 6:30 on Friday, and then staying on the road, they will take on the LSU Tigers at 1 p.m. coming up on Sunday in Baton Rouge. That's in Baton Rouge. Here in Tuscaloosa, football to be played, and we will be very busy coming up at Champions Lane, just outside of Bryant-Denny Stadium, the north entrance, right next to the Walk of Champions. Here's a look at everything that's coming up, and we'll start by talking about some of the different things that are coming up here in this Champions Lane area. First of all, with the Bud Light Backyard, we'll get to hear some live music from Jake Matthew from 2:15 to 3:45. Jamison Rogers will really rock the house starting at 4:45, right after the Walk of Champions right there. So go from the Walk of Champions to the Bud Light Backyard. Have a great time there as well. Even while you're waiting for the Walk of Champions, some great opportunities for some autographs coming up. First from the Alabama Spirit Squad starting at 3 p.m. At 3:30, some members of the rowing team will be along. And then at 4:45, after the Walk of Champions is done, 3 women's basketball players, Loyal McQueen, Sarah Ashley Barker, and then NC State transfer Jessica Timmons, signing autographs right here as well. We'll have the Legends Lounge Beer Garden that will be available. And again, Champions Lane is open starting at noon coming coming up on Saturday. So right after College game day is done, make your way to Champions Lane. It will be available. Legends Lounge will be a good time, especially with some of the food trucks and the interactive partner displays. A World of Beer, Texas Roadhouse, Full Moon Barbecue there as well. And then Billy's Gourmet Hot Dogs. Absolutely delicious. One of our new partners. Make sure you check out Billy's Gourmet Hot Dogs. Again, great displays in this area. And again, this is the place to really get set for Alabama football. Each and every game, it's open, free to the public. Champions Lane, the Bud Light Backyard. Again, great music. Legends Lounge. A lot of fun coming up on Saturday. We certainly hope that Jalen Milroe keeps having a lot of fun at quarterback for the Crimson Tide. Played great against Tennessee, especially in that second half, and he is now set for Alabama against LSU, and he joins us as one of our one-on-one conversations this week as we get set for Alabama and LSU. Jalen, Roll Tide, how'd you guys use the bye week to your advantage?
We utilized the bye week just to allow everyone to refocus as far as preparing for this week, but also getting our mind and body right. So I think the bye was very beneficial for us.
Last time we saw you guys on the field, you were having a lot of fun in the second half against Tennessee. What allowed you guys to get off to such a good start right at a halftime?
I think the biggest thing we had to acknowledge was just our mindset was winning. I think that was very key for our success. We just acknowledged that we had a mission, and our mission was to win. So it took just one play at a time, and whenever those big plays hit, they hit. But the biggest thing was just refocusing on just one play at a time, and then just allowing everybody on the team just to know that we have a mission.
Speaking of big plays, certainly saw that from Isaiah Bond. What's made him a great target for you this year?
I think his confidence level constantly increases as he plays. I think experience is the best teacher. He plays a lot of snaps for us this year. So I think each week that goes by, he's just getting better and better. And then he has great practice habits that allows him to grow as well.
Speaking of consistency, how about the play right now of Seth McLaughlin at center? We've seen really consistent snaps from him the last few weeks.
Yeah, me and Seth, I say we have a great relationship. And we're going to continue to have that throughout the season. But we just worked on little things that we all improve on and stuff like that. But we all are not finished products. So we all just trying to work to improve, and Seth's doing a great job for us.
Absolutely. And now the Crimson Tide get ready for a good football team in the LSU Tigers. What have you learned about them and their defense so far?
Great team as far as just offense and defense. So our preparation this week is going to be important to allow us to be successful this week. And we just acknowledge, that we're playing a great team coming up. And we're going to need the fans to bring a lot of juice to the stadium, bring all the energy, and have the stadium rocking.
They certainly did against Tennessee. Just what was that like getting to celebrate with your teammates with the fan support? We saw your post-game interview on CBS, so you're having a lot of fun with Coach Saban as well.
That was a lot of fun. Our fans brought a lot of juice, and that ultimately, factored into us, our performance and, the energy that they brought to us. I thought it was very fun, playing in Bryant-Denny. And we're going to need that this week for sure.
Certainly will. Jalen Milroe, we look forward to it. Thank you so much for joining us. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Crimson Drive is driven by NASCAR, and you know what sounds good? A weekend of good times, unforgettable entertainment, and 3 wide, high-speed thrills all race long. That's what NASCAR Spring Weekend in Atlanta is all about, and the best way to experience it is at the track. Don't miss the Aim Better Health 400 weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway with 3 days of racing thrills. That's February 23rd to the 25th. Atlanta is the hottest ticket in NASCAR, so don't wait. Get yours now at atlantamotorspeedway.com. We continue on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. After hearing from the quarterback of the Crimson Tide, now it's time to hear from the head coach. Nick Saban on Wednesday held his final press conference of the week as Alabama prepares for Saturday's challenge with LSU.
Most important thing I think in this game is, great practice habits, technically work on the things that you need to do to go execute. You're going to play against a good player. They have a lot of good players. Need to know exactly what to do, how to do it, why it's important to do it that way. So when it comes to the game, you're not really thinking about it. You can do it automatically. And that takes great preparation and focus. And that's what's going to help you have success in the game. And that's what guys have to stay focused on. You can't worry about what anybody else says or thinks or does. You got to worry about what you got to do. And I think that's the most important thing for our team right now.
Hey, Coach. You've been a part of a lot of these. With Tommy facing Brian Kelly this week, how's he approached this week, and how's he really started to settle in as the OC?
Brian Kelly is been a really, really good coach wherever he's been for a long, long time. He's smart. They've got great system offensively. Players are well coached. They got discipline. They play hard. They play with toughness. They play with great intangibles. You know, he's got a winning process that has worked, you know, at Notre Dame, Cincinnati, every place he's ever coached. I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for him, and I think he's doing an outstanding job there. I mean, you know, they went to the SEC championship game last year, and, you know, got a really, really good team this year. So I think he's doing an outstanding job. I don't think anything different. You know, Tommy works hard and tries to do the best he can to help our players to play well in the game. I don't think in these kind of games you want to sort of try to, I don't know what you would call it, do a lot of new stuff, because the players need to have confidence in what you're doing, and they gain confidence in doing that through, you know, cumulative reps throughout the course of the season. And if you just make a bunch of changes, you know, they start looking at you like, you know, don't you think we can execute what we've been doing? So I think you got to be a little careful, but I don't see that happening. I think he's focused on trying to get our players in the right spots to do the right things that help them have a chance to be successful. You know, I think it's great for our fans that we have, you know, quality opponents that come here and they have an opportunity to, you know, cheer our team on. I think the atmosphere and environment that's been created in all of our games this year has been phenomenal. I think it's going to be really, really important in this game. I thought it was absolutely as good as it ever gets in the Tennessee game, which I think had an impact on the game and affected them. And I think it's going to be important that we have that same kind of atmosphere in this game. But I think it's exciting for our fans. I know our players, you know, love playing in Bryant-Denny Stadium, and big games are, you know, always something that you look forward to playing, especially in front of an enthusiastic home crowd.
Where will you be on game day? Be part of the action with a premium reserve tailgate from Game Day Done Right. Get your group together. Pick your game and tailgate package, add on catering, beverages, and other tailgating amenities, and let Game Day Done Right take it from there. Enjoy all the fun of game day with zero stress. Visit GameDayDoneRight.com to reserve your tailgate today. For your next tailgate, just add people. Game Day Done Right is the exclusive provider of reserved tailgating opportunities for the University of Alabama and offers packages for all group sizes for a single game or for the entire season. As we roll along on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, we always like to take a big picture look at Crimson Tide football, especially with somebody that knows it so well, like Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News. He covers all of Alabama athletics for the Tuscaloosa News, and we always enjoy our conversations with him, getting his perspective on Alabama heading into Saturday's game with LSU. Nick, we were just talking before we started recording. It's kind of back to some weather from your native land as we get ready for this ball game. You got to be happy about that.
Yes, to be clear, Minnesota weather. Despite what some people like to say that I'm from Canada, I'm not. Pretty close, but I've never actually been to Canada. But yes, it is more similar. But I think we have snow back home in Minnesota, so not quite that level yet. But it is chillier here, and it's football weather. Frankly, I mean, if you're a football player, I think you'd have to love a little cooler weather like this, considering how warm it has been.
Absolutely. Football weather for what's going to be a massive matchup for the Alabama Crimson Tide, really the SEC West on the line. Just what's been the focus of your coverage this week as you get ready for Alabama and LSU?
I think it's just an LSU offense. I mean, it's hard not to think about that group. Because Coach Saban and players have talked about it quite a bit, but also you look at the statistics. I mean, this is a fantastic offense. I mean, it's no secret they have success, lead the country in scoring. Jaden Daniels is a Heisman candidate quarterback. He's first or, top 5 in several passing categories. He can run the football. They've got Diggs, a really good running back. They've got 2 receivers who combined for 20 touchdowns. So LSU can score. And so it's going to be interesting to see how Alabama's defense can counter that, because I don't think it's going to face a tougher test this season.
And speaking of that Alabama defense, obviously didn't get off to the start they wanted to against Tennessee, but it had a great finish, blanking the Vols in the second half. Just from your perspective, how did Alabama's defense get better as that game went along?
Yeah, I think just handle the tempo better. That can be tricky. And granted, I think the fans really helped with that too. That's something that Coach Saban and the players have talked about, where that tempo can be disrupted with a friendly home crowd, so to speak. So I think that just handle that tempo better after Joe Mel. But man, that feels like a month ago now. That after that bye week, I had to go back in my memory a little bit as to what happened in that game because it goes by quick. And so it was definitely an impressive effort. And I just thought that I just had a better time with that speed that Tennessee uses and just the quickness and really those forward down stops were huge. To be able to do that against that offense that can run that well, the run defense really got shored up and really looked good against Tennessee, especially in that second half.
Yeah, great second half for the Alabama defense. The offense can say the same thing with how quickly they scored coming out of the locker room after halftime. And it seems like this offense keeps adding something a little bit different each and every week. Just where are your thoughts on Jalen Milroe and where this Crimson Tide offense stands heading into this game?
Yeah, I think he keeps getting better. That's been the biggest thing for him is no, he's not perfect and no quarterback is, but I think that he's finding ways to learn from his mistakes and to make sure he's not making the same ones. And he's really having a solid season. I mean, I think it's because of the quarterback play that Alabama's had over the past however many years. It can be easy to lose sight of the season Jalen Milroe's having. I mean, he still is one of the better passers in the country in efficiency. Jaden Daniels is the best, actually. But so another tough measurement, so to speak. But Jalen's a solid quarterback, and he's gotten better. And I just think that to me, just that offense goes as he tends to go. And part of that's the nature of the position. Part of it's just who Jalen is and the leader he is. But I think overall, I've been seeing improvement. Doesn't mean he won't ever make mistakes, but I just overall he seems to be being that point guard that Coach Saban wants. And I've been impressed by Jalen more often than not.
So the Crimson Tide ready for the LSU Tigers, and this game could very well come down to special teams. And Alabama's lucky to have Will Reichard back for another season. And Will Reichard, the subject of a feature story from Mr. Kelly in the Tuscaloosa News. What can you tell us about what you learned about Will Reichard? Obviously, we want fans to go to the paper or the website to read the full story, but if you could, just a few tidbits from your Will Reichard deep dive.
Yeah, well, if I shared everything, it would take probably it's a 2,000-word story, so I'm definitely not gonna be able to give it all away. But yeah, it was really fun. I just, he's become such a legend in Tuscaloosa that, and really the state of Alabama, that I just wanted to collect as many stories as I could about this guy. And so some of it's football, some of it's off the field, some of it's about his dog, Denny, aptly named for Bryant Denny and Denny Chimes. And so he's Alabama through and through. But it's really fun to hear people in his life, some cool stories, like a dispute about on a duck hunting trip. There was a time that he got spotted internationally. So just all kinds of fun, just frankly random stories that some have something to do with the others, some don't. It was just really fun to get to know him on different levels and different stories about him. And one of those stories, actually, this week it's fitting. His first offer came from LSU. He was in Coach Orgeron's office and got that offer, and I got to hear that story from someone else who was in that room at the time. So all kinds of stories, all kinds of things going on there, and so it was a lot of fun to write, and I hope folks will check it out.
Yeah, he's not far from becoming the NCAA all-time leader in scoring. Already has that for the SEC, and we've seen him get some All-America, some All-SEC recognition before. But is this kind of the year that he cashes in an award season, you feel like?
I mean, if he keeps up with this pace, he's perfect so far. He hasn't missed a kick yet. And his perfect season in 2020 was great, but the volume wasn't quite there as much just because that offense was so good. And partly, too, they didn't have as many games because, 10 during the regular season during that COVID year. But and I think they finished with 13 games total, but you have to check my numbers on that. It feels so long ago now. But yeah, I think for him, he's at the volume he's going. He not only has been perfect, but he also is kicking more. He had big kicks. He had a 50-yarder against Tennessee, right? I mean, so Will's had some. He stepped up clutch for him, and so I think if there's a year for him to really rack up awards, it's probably this one. And obviously, he could miss a kick. He probably can afford to and still rack up some awards. But if he stays perfect, I mean, it's going to be hard not to give him all the awards.
We look forward to that, and we look forward, of course, to Saturday's game, Alabama against LSU. But then just a couple days later, the focus of Tuscaloosa will shift to Coleman Coliseum, a men's and women's basketball doubleheader. I know you covered SEC Media Days in Mountain Brook. Just what have you learned so far about Nate Oates and this Crimson Tide basketball team that will start the season this Monday night?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of intrigue around a lot of guys on that team just because it looks so different from a year ago. You've got guys like Grant Nelson and Jaron Stevenson and just a full roster of guys that you just don't necessarily know what to expect. But you know they have pieces. It's just how those pieces fall. And I think that it's pretty clear they don't have a Brandon Miller. I mean, most teams don't. That's a once in probably a decade kind of talent. There's a reason he was the top college player last year drafted. So they're probably not going to have a guy like that. But you don't necessarily have to. I think in some ways, if you have a team that's a little bit more just well distributed, you can't have someone that other teams can key on. That can really help you in March, especially if that player gets cold. And so for Alabama, I think it's really intriguing to see kind of how they do, but also how they do post Charles Bediako, because losing him, obviously he didn't have the same maybe name recognition that a Brandon Miller did, but he was so key for what they did last year. He was that anchor of that defense, and Alabama in its years that it's won the SEC under Nate Oates has had a guy who can basically make up for mistakes defensively of other players. It was Herb Jones a couple seasons ago, and it was Charles Bediako a season ago. I'm not sure if they have that guy, so defense might be a work in progress. I'll have to see how that pans out. But for me, I'm just intrigued to see how this all goes together. And really, this is a new era for Nate Oates because he's without his guys, Antoine Petway, Brian Hodgson, Charlie Henry. And so this is a completely different staff. And now he has to deal with the challenge of that Nick Saban's had to with staff turnover and trying to keep that same standard. So I'm just really intrigued, Roger, frankly, just to see what this team looks like, what they do, where they might stumble. It's just, for me, there's a lot of questions, and I'm excited to get some of them answered soon.
Alabama basketball, Alabama football, it's all happening, and Nick Kelly is covering it for the Tuscaloosa News. Nick, just thank you so much for your time. Have a great time this weekend and spilling into next week with basketball coverage. Thank you for your time with us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network.
Thanks for having me, Roger. It's an exciting time of year. November is such a fun month, and I'm ready for it.
In the beginning was Daytona, the great American race. Every driver looking to be remembered. Every fan looking for something they'll never forget. Secure your seats now at Daytona500.com.
We're certainly all excited to be back at Bryant-Denny Stadium for what's going to be the last SEC game of the regular season at home, plus the next to last game at home in general, as Alabama will go on the road next week to Kentucky, home the next week against Chattanooga, then that will be it for the home schedule. But all throughout the home season, people have been loving these vintage Alabama cups from Yeti. Only $45, you can purchase these at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and you are able to get a free non-alcoholic beverage of your choice. And again, it is a great keepsake. We're in November. You're already starting to hear Christmas music, see Christmas lights being put up, Christmas shopping. This is the perfect item that every Crimson Tide fans wants to see in their Crimson stocking on Christmas morning. A Roll Tide Yeti cup. Again, that vintage logo with the Roll Tide on the bottom of the banner. Certainly love that. And you can pick it up at Bryant-Denny Stadium coming up this Saturday. I'll have mine with me in the booth when Alabama takes on LSU. And right next to me will be Eli Gold. He's preparing to call what is another great matchup between the Crimson Tide and the Tigers, in addition to hosting tonight's edition of Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show. So it's perfect time to check on in with Eli Gold as we get ready for the Tide and the Tigers. Eli, we missed you last week, but we hope the open date was good for you and the family. Roll Tide, sir.
Yeah, I enjoyed listening. And well, last week I listened and watched other games all across the country. And that's something that, you know, with the Sirius XM and all of the other stuff going, you can keep tabs on different broadcasters. So, yeah, I watched a lot of games, both Saturday and Sunday. Of course, Sunday, it's like watching an Alabama game anyway, because you got 50 some odd Alabama players in the National Football League. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. But now it's time to get back to work against, a Jaden Daniels-led offense that is one of the best, if not the best, in America.
Certainly will be entertaining. Alabama against LSU coming up on Saturday. If we could, let's go back 2 weeks to the Tennessee game and the second half turnaround for the Crimson Tide. Just what were some of your main takeaways on what turned out to be a very fun afternoon and evening in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, it turned out to be great. That was the biggest takeaway. Well, my big takeaway was I don't know what Nick Saban told these guys at halftime, but he needs to bottle it and sell it, and he'll make a fortune. But no, it was quite the impressive performance. They're young kids. And that's something we can't ever overlook. These are youngsters. And whatever it was, they needed to have a little wake-up call at halftime, and they did, and they play. And now, if they can play Saturday the way they did in the second half against Tennessee, then Alabama comes away with the W. They'd be darn near anybody that they could play the way they did in the second half against the Vols. The big question is, does the Alabama defense show up the way we saw against Tennessee? Because, the old saying, and we've talked about it, defense wins championships. And that's and that's what did it. But when you've got an Alabama defense, and I'm just looking here at the numbers nationally, when you've got a Crimson Tide defense that is second in the SEC and 15th in the country, well, that's pretty darn good. But then you're taking a look at an LSU offense, which is first in the Southeastern Conference, 11th in rushing, 4th in passing in the country. They're first or second in every offensive category in the SEC, but they're first in the nation in scoring, 11th in rushing. They're 4th in passing, 2nd in pass efficiency. At 552 yards, they are right now first in total yards in America. It's not going to be an easy ball game by any stretch of the imagination.
It certainly won't be, and that's how it's been in the Saban era with all these great matchups through the years against LSU. And we kind of talked about it a little bit for the Tennessee game. There's no guarantee that LSU will be on Alabama's schedule each and every year moving forward. So you've got to appreciate moments like this when, again, it's a huge stage, the SEC West on the line. It's Alabama, it's LSU.
Yeah, and as we've talked in the past, people talk about Auburn, they talk about Tennessee. Do you realize that Alabama and LSU 22 times now, one or both of the teams have been in the top 5 in the country when they played each other? That's not the case this time around, but it's close to being another top 5 performance. That's the thing you've got to look at. It's a great series, and it's going to be very interesting. Why? Because Alabama has ability. LSU has tons of ability. There are injuries in the LSU secondary that I'm sure they would rather not be having to deal with here, and that's going to be a factor. Does the Alabama defense, do its job while the offense, if the defense for LSU is banged up and guys aren't playing, does Jalen Milroe pick it apart? If it comes down to like the game of the century a number of years ago, all of a sudden you got Damian Ramos kicking against Will Reichert. I can say Ramos, I can't say Reichert. All of a sudden you've now got a big advantage for Alabama. So there's just so many wild card items here. But it's going to be a good ball game. It is going to be a great ball game. And what we need to see also and hear is what we heard against Tennessee, the way the fans just bellowed their way through that ball game and really made it very, very difficult for the Tennessee Volunteers to even hear, let alone think or execute.
And Coach Saban was asking the fans to get loud during a Hey Coach and the Nick Saban show before that Tennessee game, and I imagine he may be saying the same thing coming up on Thursday night. What's planned for the show coming up? Hey Coach and the Nick Saban show back at Baumhauer's in Tuscaloosa.
We're going to talk baseball in light of the World Series about to, put a capper on this season. We're going to take a look at Alabama baseball with a new skipper, a new coach in charge. We'll talk about that. We've got Brad Nessler coming in from CBS. He's going to be our media guest, and we always enjoy him because he's real sharp. Nick Saban loves him, so they always have great repartee when they sit down together. And of course, the coach will be with us after joining us last week on the phone. So it's going to be back to normal, and it should be a full house at Baumhauer's Victory Grill.
Fans will be ready for the Crimson Tide and the LSU Tigers on Saturday. We'll have the broadcast starting at 3:30. Eli, thank you so much for your time with us this week on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, and have fun with Coach Saban later on. Roll Tide.
I will. Thanks so much, Raj.
Chris Blair, it is going to be a massive showdown between Alabama and LSU, but I think we're pretty much used to that at this point.
Yeah, we are used to it, Roger. Good to be joined with you. Looking forward to going to Tuscaloosa and being there for this atmosphere once again. But who'd have thunk it? You know, a lot of people around college football, I think at certain points this year, left Alabama out of the equation, left LSU out of the equation. And here we are, another matchup where, you know, implications on the SEC West, ultimately possibly the SEC, and who knows, college football playoffs. So it's amazing how these two teams have both gotten better each and every week. But to hear the national, media, you can't do that anymore. You got to be ready to go week number one. So, again, as I said, who'd thunk it?
Absolutely. And looking at LSU, lost in week one against Florida State, also lost early on in SEC play to Ole Miss. And everyone, like you said, kind of forgot about LSU, even when they were trailing against Missouri. But kind of since that Missouri game, what have you seen from the LSU Tigers?
Well, it's been a massive improvement defensively. I mean, you know, you look at the offense in week number one, that necessarily, they didn't hit a lot of big plays, Roger, but that didn't necessarily lose the game. It was the inability to stop Florida State's offense. It was a complete, loss of defense against Ole Miss. They couldn't stop the Rebels at all. You get one or two stops in that game and you score 49 points on the road in the SEC, you should win that, and you would have won that. But since that point, I think you nailed it. Since the second half of Missouri, because Missouri came out first three drives, went right through LSU's defense with no problem, and suddenly they were able to get a stop. Harold Perkins with that interception slowed them down. I think stumbled Missouri just enough that then Jaden Daniels and this LSU offense, which is putting up just incredible video game numbers, were able to get back into the game, then take control of the game. And then in the second half, I think LSU's defense really disrupted what Brady Cook and his offense wanted to do. They were able to take really Luther Burton out of the mix in that second half. And since then, had a great performance defensively against Auburn. They were certainly outmatched, but they handled Army with no problem with a 62-0 shutout victory. So there's still a lot of work to be done. The offense has been pretty consistent most of the year. But the defense has got to get better, and their biggest challenge, obviously, will come against Alabama in Bryant-Denny Stadium.
How key is Harold Perkins to this LSU defense?
Well, finding the right spot for him. And I think, it's easy for us to say, well, he ought to do this every single game. But I think that's not giving a lot of credit to your opponent, because they obviously are game planning for Harold Perkins Jr. He's just that type of athlete that you have to do that. So I think LSU, as LSU's opponents have tried to figure out how to work against Perkins, I think, truthfully, LSU's had to figure out defensively where they want him to be and what his plan is against each and every opponent. His best attribute is getting after the quarterback, or certainly getting back into the offensive backfield and causing disruption. And here of late, they found a way to have him do both. He's kind of the nickel position, I guess, if you will. Again, there's been so much depletion to LSU secondary a weak secondary coming into the year, as it were, and now losing players. So he's had to sit back in coverage as well and handle that as part of his responsibility. But when he gets to pin his ears back and come after the offensive backfield, that's where he's most dangerous. But again, I think LSU still, the last couple of games, he has disrupted games. His defense has impacted games, but they're still learning a little bit on the job.
As we talk early in the week, getting ready for Saturday, just what are some of those key injuries that are limiting LSU right now?
Well, the big one earlier this week, Mekhi Wingo out for the foreseeable future, had surgery during the off week, which everyone found out about in Coach Kelly's press conference on Monday. So that's a big loss. I mean, again, he was an All-American last year, kind of had to stand in there for the injured Mason Smith, who missed all of the season outside of a couple of plays in the opener a year ago. And really had been coming into his own and was a big part of the reason LSU's defense had really started to develop in the Missouri game and certainly in the Auburn game. So without him, that's a big anchored loss for LSU up front. Now they've got some players who've had plenty of time there, but without Mekhi Wingo, nobody wants to go into a game without your real anchor in the middle of that defensive front. And then in the secondary, I mean, Zy Alexander, interception against Army at the end of the first half. I'm sure if he had it to do over, you take the interception with the clock, triple zeros, take a knee, head to the locker room. He made a return attempt. He was pulled down from behind, and he also has suffered an injury. And, again, he won't be available this weekend. And that's a big loss for an already depleted LSU secondary, which has struggled mightily this year. They knew coming into the year it was going to be their weakest position group, and it has been. And now, after some back-to-back games where they played much better, challenging for the football, doing a much better job of covering their area, whether it be zone or man-to-man, now you're just down with a lot of true freshmen that are certainly untested, that are going to be tested big time, baptized by fire, as they say, against Milroe and his receivers in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So it's tough. It's not as if LSU has a ton of critical injuries, Roger. It's just a matter of where they are. They are critical for this team this particular year.
And looking at the other side of the ball, obviously we saw what Jaden Daniels can do a season ago, played brilliantly against Alabama, leading to that win for LSU against the Crimson Tide. But we know he's off to a good start this season. What about the supporting cast, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends? Who's helping him be most effective for that LSU offense?
Well, as you know, LSU is getting a lot of credit for their offense because of the numbers they're putting up, and not only top in categories in the SEC, both out of conference overall and in conference games, but they're leading a lot of categories across the country. I mean, it's a prolific offense, and it starts with Jaden Daniels. But I think what people sometimes lose is the emergence of the run game, which was really not available to start this season, and it's gotten steadily better and better as each week has gone along. And a lot of that has to do with, the offensive line, which we thought was the strength coming into this year. Took them a couple of games to get their footing under them, to be honest with you. I think they're playing much better now over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And then Logan Diggs, the transfer from Notre Dame. We didn't know what kind of impact he was going to have. But now, he's you can almost pencil him in for close to 100 yards rushing every game. And then you throw on top of that Jaden Daniels, who, again, has the ability to extend plays with his feet and make the throw downfield. You also have him in design runs where he's just a great runner. He's able to elude tacklers. He's got deceiving speed. And so I think the running game, along with all the receivers that are uber talented, don't get me wrong, I think that's what's made this LSU defense a little tougher. I mean, it's not as if teams can come in now and say, look, we're just going to try to take away Neighbors, or we'll try to take away Thomas to make another receiver beat us. If you're going to drop back in coverage, LSU is more than happy to line it up and run the football. And to be honest with you, I don't think that's a weapon they had for the most part consistently in last year's team. So I think Logan Diggs and the offensive line deserve a lot of credit. But Jaden Daniels is the straw that stirs this drink. Make no mistake.
I think last year in our interview, we talked a lot about Brian Kelly, his first year at LSU, talking about the family and all the different things about his transition to Baton Rouge. But obviously, a great first year, wins the SEC West. As he's in year two, midway in year two, how do you continue to see him make this program in his own light?
Well, to your point, I think people knew when you get to a program like LSU, you will fit if you win. And so year number one, he was able to go out and do that, win the SEC West. And, here has himself in a position again to battle for an SEC West crown, certainly be in the mix. But I think for Coach Kelly and his staff, which for the most part, you look at the two coordinators, they were able to keep both of those. There's some continuity there. I think there's less building the plane as it's headed down the runway. I think that really was what was taking place last year with new players, new coaches, new building. I mean, all the things they had to learn, where the closets are and where to put this and where to put that. So I think all of that's behind them now. So I think they're a lot more comfortable in the operation of the overall program. And again, I think it goes back to recruiting. He's mentioned they've used the transfer portal more than he would like in the first 2 years, but that was by necessity. But they're really banking on, really putting a push in recruiting to up those recruiting classes so that they have 2 or 3 years to develop players, as opposed to bringing in players out of the portal. No offense. You can do all the due diligence, but until you put them out there in front of, 90,000 plus at Bryant-Denny Stadium, you really don't know what you got. And so I think all of that is going back to the comfortability that Coach Kelly now has along with the entire staff for year number 2.
Well, we'll look forward to this matchup, the Alabama Crimson Tide, the LSU Tigers on Saturday. Chris, thank you so much for your time to give us a great scouting report on LSU. We look forward to seeing you in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. Thank you.
Always a great time. Looking forward to it. We'll shake hands and have a laugh or two. Thanks, Roger.